So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, Riley! Yeah!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Lions Talk. It is Sunday. There's no football to be talking about. There's no football to be watching, but we do have, some time here to talk about the Detroit Lions. And I don't really have a video ready for today. And I know it's a little later in the day. It's 3 o'clock, and I apologize for that. But I wanted to come back and talk a little bit more about the Detroit Lions. So as people start to get in here, we are going to start off, and I do have a starting topic for today, and this has been requested by a lot of different people, and that is, of course, whether the Detroit Lions should take Kayvon Thibodeaux or Aidan Hutchinson in this upcoming draft. So to start today, we are going to talk about the two prospects individually. We are going to compare what they do well. We're going to compare what they don't do well. We're going to compare their strengths and weaknesses to one another and try to come down to who is the true edge rusher one in this draft class. So with that being the case, as people start to roll in, and this will be its own video eventually, I will put, kind of cut some of this out, and I will put this into an actual video format. But for now, we're going to do it for the people that are here and ready to go. Fernando is the first one in here saying, yes, finally, I do. I broke down Kayvon Thibodeaux a couple days ago. I watched a lot of film. I watched a lot of tape on Kayvon. I was very, very impressed with what I saw from Kayvon Thibodeaux, and I wanted to speak about his strengths and weaknesses and then compare that to the scouting report I did on Aidan Hutchinson, So with that being said, let us switch over to Kayvon Thibodeaux. Now, what I did, as you can kind of see, I laid this out. This is kind of just how I keep everything straight. I have Aidan Hutchinson's right below this, and I have it all on one Google sheet just so I can see, kind of go through them and rank them. Kayvon Thibodeaux is my edge rusher one. And I'm going to explain Kayvon. I'm going to go through a scouting report on him, and then I'm going to compare him to Aidan Hutchinson. So the games I watched from Kayvon, I watched the Washington game from this year, the Washington State game from this year, and the UCLA game from this year. Now, his total career stats as an Oregon pass rusher are 126 tackles, 35.5 tackles for loss, 19 sacks, 7 passes defended, and 3 forced fumbles, and he did this in just 30 career games. So, he averaged almost a tackle, and he averaged more than 1 tackle for loss a game, and almost averaged a sack more than every other game. So he is really good. He was productive at the college level, did miss a little bit of time due to injury, but when actually looking at the injuries that he had and actually looking at time he missed, it wasn't really as significant as I thought it was previously. Actually going through and looking at the numbers out of the total games that he could have played, the injuries aren't as concerning right now as they were when I first heard about, Kayvon might have this, really bad knack for just getting these small injuries that are going to keep him out. So we're going to start off with the pros of Kayvon Thibodeaux. Now, Kayvon Thibodeaux is, I didn't put his height and weight in here, but he is, I believe, 6'5", 215 pounds. He is a little bit smaller than Aidan Hutchinson, a little lighter and a little shorter, but not significantly enough where I can say, oh, you are going to put one person above another because of that, right? I would say Aidan Hutchinson is bigger and stronger, but Aidan Hutchinson is bigger and stronger. Kayvon is definitely a faster and more athletic player. Now, getting onto the pros, the first thing that stood out to me is that with the Oregon defense, Kayvon Thibodeaux was extremely versatile. He played an edge rusher position primarily, but he also played outside linebacker where he did cover. He played interior defensive lineman where he was not the farthest most player rushing the passer. There was an edge rusher outside of him, so he did technically play inside defensive line. And there were games where he played middle linebacker. There were games where he would line up as the middle linebacker, whether it be the Will backer, the Mike backer, or even just a Sam linebacker. And there where he was standing up, he was behind the line of scrimmage. He was, as a stand-up linebacker, And I mean, a lot of those times he rushed right up the middle, kind of got one-on-one with the center and was able to use his power to go right through the center and get some interior pressure on the quarterback, forcing some sacks and forcing some turnovers. But, I think that ability, and I think that, when you're talking about Aaron Glenn and he wants this defensive player that can play a lot of different roles in his defense, Kayvon Thibodeaux can play everything from inside defensive tackle, and not defensive tackle, interior defensive lineman like a Michael Brockers, all the way to a middle Mike linebacker, like where you're going to see Alex Anzalone next year if he resigns, where you're going to see our Mike linebacker. He played that position as well, and he didn't just rush the passer. He also covered really, really well, and he moved in space incredibly well. And that's the next point that I wanted to mention was Kayvon is not even just good at covering for an edge rusher. Kayvon Thibodeaux is legitimately a good coverage linebacker. I mean, he is athletic enough and he's fluid enough to cover running backs and tight ends in both man and zone coverage. I mean, there are probably 10, 15 plays that I could think of that I saw in just 3 games where Kayvon Thibodeaux was standing, he had his hand in the dirt, he looked like he was going to rush, then he stood up, he, dropped back into coverage, he flipped his hips, he actually moved really, really well in space, and there were times where he matched up versus tight ends. There's a couple times even where Kayvon Thibodeaux matched up against running backs on the wheel, and I think that does speak to his freakish athleticism. I think it does speak to his ability to just be a better athlete than everybody. But it's not just that he was athletic enough to stay with these guys, right? It's not like he played poor coverage and was only able to stay with them because of his speed and because of his athleticism. He had, fairly solid technique. He played coverage really, really well. And he made windows really tight, and that forced the quarterback to make a better throw. And even if he wasn't necessarily blanketing, right, even if he wasn't like had his hand on the other guy or didn't have like his hand on the other team's back in coverage, right, even if he wasn't step for step with the guy, Kayvon Thibodeaux is 6'5". If you put Kayvon Thibodeaux on a flat, it's going to be really hard to throw over a 6'5", really super athletic linebacker / edge rusher to fit that ball in 15 yards on an out route, right? And it's not that Kayvon Thibodeaux has to be in blanket coverage necessarily. He doesn't have to be, step for step with these guys. But his ability to drop and move in free space and move in coverage, I think, is a really big thing on why Kayvon Thibodeaux is so valuable in this draft class and why he is so unique as an edge rusher, because he's not just a traditional edge like Aidan Hutchinson. You can put Kayvon Thibodeaux in coverage versus, running backs versus tight ends, right? And as long as it's not a Travis Kelce or a Darren Waller or a George Kittle, he's probably going to cover that guy really, really well. And even with those more athletic guys, I think Kayvon can run with them. That's just obviously not an ideal matchup with anybody, but I mean, you can name a running back in the NFL, and Kayvon Thibodeaux can probably outrun them and probably stick with them on a wheel route. And the other thing that I think is really helpful when it comes to Kayvon's ability to actually cover is his freakish athleticism. And it's not to say that Aidan Hutchinson isn't athletic. It's not to say that Aidan Hutchinson can't cover because of his lack of athleticism. But I think him and Kayvon are athletic in very, very different ways. Whereas I think Aidan Hutchinson is really strong and powerful and fast, I think Kayvon Thibodeaux is fast, powerful, and fluid. And maybe he doesn't have the explosiveness and the power that Aidan Hutchinson has. And it's not that Kayvon doesn't have power, but I think Aidan Hutchinson is more of a power guy. He's more of a straight line runner where, if you line him up, he's going to go straight at the quarterback, but he can't really change direction all that well. Whereas Kayvon Thibodeaux is powerful, but he's also fluid. He does change directions really well, but some of that fluidity and some of that change of direction does take away from the power. And I will say he's not as powerful as Aidan Hutchinson when it comes to things like bull rush and just penetrating the pocket. But when it comes to changing those directions, tackling an open space, and getting around the edge, like physically bending around the outside of the tackle and cutting it back towards the quarterback, I think that Kayvon Thibodeaux has an edge there as well. Now, Kayvon Thibodeaux is a raw prospect, and this next point saying displayed good hand use is not necessarily saying that he's a super refined product, but he showed abilities throughout all of the games that I saw of him using swims, of him using swipes, of him using counter moves. I mean, you name it, he probably did it really well at some point. I saw a really nice spin move in I think it was the Washington game. And I mean, in all 3 of these games were very, very different. He dominated the UCLA game. He didn't really play all that well versus Washington. He really, really did not. I mean, he didn't he didn't really produce that much at Washington. I think he had like one tackle for loss, maybe a half a tackle for loss in that game. But I mean, he still showed really good hand movement. He got pressures in that game. He just couldn't quite show up on the stat sheet other than pressures. But I mean, he showed really good hand usage throughout the 3 games that I watched. And it wasn't consistent. He's still raw and still does need to learn some things, especially when it comes to more power-based things and when it comes to consistency, when it comes to pass rushing and using your hands. But overall, I thought Kayvon Thibodeaux showed some really positive traits when it came to using his hands. And a big thing with his hands is he gets his hand on the football. He's very intelligent when it comes to, getting the football out. He's very good at getting his hands up away from the blocker, right? Not getting too engaged with the block where if the quarterback throws it quickly, he can't get his hands up. And probably 3 or 4 of those passes defended are him knocking the ball away at the line because he is long. And when he gets his hands up, it's really hard to throw a, straight pass. It's really hard to throw a shallow pass in the direction of Kayvon Thibodeaux because he gets his hands up and gets his hand on the football. And I think that is something that is hard to teach young defensive linemen is if you can't get there, you have to get your hands up. And I think that's something that Kayvon Thibodeaux, especially Kayvon Thibodeaux, does really, really well in this year's draft class. So, I mean, his hands, they're inconsistent to say the least. He is, a very, very raw prospect to say the very least. But I do think he showed enough potential at this point to, I think he showed enough potential at this point to point at, a lot of different plays and say, okay, that guy he's raw. But if we can develop that guy, he can be an all-pro edge rusher. He can be a Hall of Fame edge rusher. I mean, this dude has an unlimited ceiling, and there are very few things holding back Kayvon Thibodeaux at this point. Now, Fernando says Thibodeaux is the exact prototype that Aaron Glenn is looking for in this defense. The one thing I think he lacks is a motor, and that was the next thing I was going to get to because in these 3 games, I did not see a lack of a motor. And, I mean, yes, there was a couple of plays here and there, particularly in the Washington State game, where I felt like maybe if Kayvon Thibodeaux played a little harder, maybe if he ran a little bit, put in that one extra gear, maybe he could have gotten there. But on all of those plays, Kayvon let up when he saw 3 other teammates around the running back, when he saw 3 other teammates, about to make this tackle, and then they didn't make the tackle. And then Kayvon looks bad because he didn't get there, but he also expects his teammates to play well for him. And there were a lot of plays that I saw where he put in a phenomenal effort. I mean, there was one play against UCLA, I believe, where Kayvon Thibodeaux starts on the opposite side. He, makes his way to the quarterback. The quarterback reverses field and kind of throws it back to where Kayvon started. Kayvon makes his way all the way back. The pass is tipped in the air, and Kayvon probably travels 30 yards on that play and very nearly gets an interception. He didn't quite catch the ball, wasn't quite able to get there, but he showed so much effort. And I wish I could find these clips and I wish I could show these clips to describe exactly what I'm talking about. But there were so many plays where Kayvon showed really, really good effort. I mean, he showed an incredibly high motor in plays. And I would say the amount of plays where he showed poor effort versus the amount of plays where he showed phenomenal effort are outweighed pretty significantly in favor of the good motor. There was one play versus UCLA very early in the game where Kayvon Thibodeaux was in coverage as a linebacker. Kayvon Thibodeaux was following this running back out on a wheel route. Kayvon Thibodeaux fell. He tripped and fell, just kind of tangled feet a little bit and got tripped up. But the quarterback saw that, went right to the running back on the wheel route. Kayvon Thibodeaux got back up off the ground and made the tackle short of the end zone. And if Kayvon Thibodeaux didn't do that, it's an easy walking touchdown. But because Kayvon Thibodeaux had that motor and had that, that energy to get back up after falling and go make this tackle because he was the only one that could, I think kind of debunks the whole he doesn't have a high motor thing. Because sure, there are plays where maybe he's not sprinting after a screen pass 30 yards down the field. And there are plays where you do see Hutchinson, right? There's a deep bomb and the wide receiver, has to cut back. And even if Hutchinson doesn't make this tackle, he's still generally in the frame because he sprints to get down there. And yes, when there's a pass 30, 40 yards downfield, Kayvon isn't always sprinting. There's a lot of times that he does. Right? He's not that he never has a high motor. And I would say, again, the amount of plays where he shows a high motor heavily outweigh the plays where he does not. But I will say that he has a slightly lower motor than Aidan Hutchinson, but it's not something that I would be concerned about if I was an NFL general manager. Hutchinson could not be doubled because of teammates. However, KT, who was feared on his team, that's another thing is like Kayvon was doubled a lot and Hutchinson was doubled a lot too. And Hutchinson was absolutely doubled because they were more scared of Hutchinson than they were of David Ojabo, which allowed David Ojabo to have an even better season. But Kayvon was doubled a lot as well. And Kayvon Thibodeaux did produce while being double teamed. He did produce. And a big thing that I also just kind of thought of popped in my head is he played against Penei Sewell every single day as a freshman and as a sophomore. So that probably really helped Kayvon Thibodeaux as well develop really fast as an edge rusher because he had to beat the best tackle in college football over and over and over again. And I think that is only going to help him. It's a very similar situation to Cooper Kupp is great, but I think part of the reason Cooper Kupp is great is because he plays Jalen Ramsey every single day in practice. And I think you playing the best makes you better. And I think Kayvon Thibodeaux was able to benefit from that for 2 straight years. Now, again, Kayvon Thibodeaux, I think, is a project guy. I think he is somebody that has a lower ceiling than Aidan Hutchinson. I think you know more of what you're getting with Aidan Hutchinson when you actually draft him, but I don't think the concerns about Kayvon Thibodeaux are necessarily valid because I think there's a lot of people that just keep hating on Kayvon Thibodeaux over and over and over again, and I just don't see it. And maybe I didn't watch the right games, and if somebody in here, has a game where it's very evident that Kayvon Thibodeaux was taking plays off and he's just not an effort player, I would love to see that game. But in the 3 games that I watched, one of them actually, I believe, maybe they didn't lose one of these games, but one of these games and a lot of these games were actually very, very close. Kayvon Thibodeaux was hustling. He was running. He was playing his heart out. And, I mean, there were probably 3 or 4 plays where, Kayvon didn't have to put in this effort. Kayvon didn't have to put in a phenomenal effort for this play. And if he didn't, it would have been a huge play, but nobody would have said anything because he was being blocked by an offensive lineman down the field, because he was being, completely schemed against, or because the play was on the complete opposite side of the field and he had no way of getting there, even if he was in a full-out sprint. And yet Kayvon Thibodeaux still worked. He still got there. He still made those tackles, right? On the wheel route example, if Kayvon Thibodeaux doesn't get up and doesn't get to the running back to make that tackle, it's because he fell. Nobody's going to look at Kayvon Thibodeaux and say, okay, you fell. You couldn't get up in time to catch this running back. That shows you have a low motor, but he still got back up and he still made that play. And that's the kind of effort I see out of Kayvon Thibodeaux more than the walking and more than the, this poor effort narrative that everybody seems to be putting out. Fernando also touches on he's a very high IQ player. That's another thing is I thought he saw concepts really, really well, especially screen passes and options. I thought he played those really well. On occasion, the read options would get him, but that's also part of like the quarterbacks reading Kayvon Thibodeaux. So it's kind of impossible to be right on a read option if it's read properly by the quarterback. But overall, he seems like a very smart player and seems to know his role in every single position, which is really, really good. Now, Kayvon Thibodeaux does have some cons. He does not set the edge very, very well. And I don't know if this was just a coaching habit. And I don't know if this was like something that was just drilled into his head by the coaches, but he does not set the edge very well in the running game. He does try to cut inside, does try to undercut that offensive tackle and make the tackle for loss. And that does sometimes leave counters open. That does sometimes leave back doors open for the running back to escape if he bounces off Thibodeaux after initial contact or if he bounces off initial contact in general. And it did bite Oregon a couple of times, which does concern me. But I think with proper coaching, you can teach him to set the edge because it's not a physical limitation that he can't set it. It's more of like a mental, I want to make this play. I want to make this tackle for loss. And I want to, be this guy that gives this tackle for loss. I don't want to just be here standing on the edge and watching everybody else make a play. I want to make this play. And I think that mentality, although it is really beneficial as an edge rusher, it really doesn't help him as a run defender. Now, again, I have this on here. He is a very average run defender. Not that he's bad, and it's not that he can't tackle, but more so just like setting the edge and forcing the run, like kind of directing the running play to where the defense wants it to go. Kayvon Thibodeaux, again, is that guy that wants to make that play. He wants to be that big impact guy, and sometimes it really helps, and sometimes it makes him that flashy player, and sometimes it makes that flashy play for a big TFL and occasionally fumbles and stuff like that. But it also occasionally leaves the back door open and leaves cutback lanes for talented running backs to take advantage of. Now, Michael Johnson says, I think Hutchinson is our guy. Don't overthink this. I don't think it's overthinking. I just think evaluating all of these players together, evaluating the big three and putting them in order, Hutchinson storyline narrative-wise makes sense. And if Aidan Hutchinson is our guy at 2, we're still getting a phenomenal player. But just because Aidan Hutchinson's from Michigan, just because that storyline fits, doesn't necessarily mean that he is the perfect player for Detroit. Or trade down and stack up on draft capital. That's another thing that we can talk about later. Who do you want at number 2? Right now, I would like to see my first out of the big three, out of Hamilton, Hutchinson, and Kayvon. My number 1 is Kyle Hamilton because I think him and Tracy Walker can be a really good safety duo, and I think they can shut down a lot of deep passes. And I think they can really limit what an offense does and what an offense can scheme for. I like Hamilton as our best option. I like Kayvon Thibodeaux as our second option. I think Kayvon Thibodeaux is a better fit for Detroit. Yes, we need to work on our run defending as well, but Romeo Okwara is a pretty good run defender. He's a good pass rusher and a really good run defender. And I think the Lions for a long time, since Ndamukong Suh, since Ziggy Ansah, have really, really missed that dominant edge rusher, that dominant pass rusher that can put up 12, 15 sacks a season. And I think Kayvon is that guy more than Aidan Hutchinson. And Aidan Hutchinson's a great player. Aidan Hutchinson is a much better run defender. He is a lot more power, and he is really, really good. But I think that he is the third option. I think he should be the third option because, honestly, I don't see all the negatives that people thought. I don't see all the negatives that people talk about with Kayvon Thibodeaux. I don't see the lack of effort. He does tackle high on occasion. He does have an average run defense. But as far as being an alpha pass rusher, which is, I think, what the Lions need more than anything, and more so being a versatile tool at the NFL level, like, again, playing linebacker, interior defensive lineman, outside linebacker, edge rusher, pass coverage, pass rush. He can do everything, whereas I don't think Aidan Hutchinson can be that versatile jack-of-all-trades type player. It's the Lions should sign every single high-end free agent season. I don't think so. I think the Lions, if they're going to sign a high-end free agent, it's going to be Marcus Williams. And if the Lions sign Marcus Williams, I think it's because they're going to go with Kayvon Thibodeaux in the draft. But if the Lions don't sign a high-end safety, I think it's because they're going to go with Kyle Hamilton in the draft. And that's just my opinion, but I don't think the Lions need to spend big money on everybody. You can spend big money on one player, right? If Marcus Williams wants to come here for $10 million a year, I think that's a reasonable deal. If Allen Robinson wants to come here for reasonable money, I think that's an okay deal. But I don't think we need to sign every big-time free agent, right? Because the Lions are still, I think, a year away from really being contenders, right? I think they'll compete for a playoff, a wild card spot this year, but they're still 1 year away from being that true, Bengals type of, jump. I like Hamilton. I do too. People passed on TJ Watt also. I mean, yeah, but TJ Watt was a little bit of a different situation. I agree with you. I see that college is paying off. Lol, JK. Hey, I try. Can't measure art and determination. And I do. I said that originally. I think that Aidan Hutchinson has a better motor. I think he has, I don't want to say more heart or more passion for the game because I think both of them do. I just think that Kayvon Thibodeaux, I think he has a lesser motor. But I don't think it's a bad motor because you can point to almost anybody else in this draft class and say that guy doesn't have the same motor as Aidan Hutchinson. And that's true. Aidan Hutchinson probably has the highest motor and the most effort in this entire draft class. And that is one of the big reasons why he is going to be a high draft pick is because his effort is phenomenal. Every single game and every single week, his pressure, his resilience, and his effort is elite. But that doesn't make him the best player. That makes him the best worker. That makes him the hardest worker, which will make him a good player. But I think Kayvon is a better fit. I think he's more versatile. I think he will transition to the NFL a little bit quicker because of that versatility. I think that Kayvon Thibodeaux is the best edge rusher in this class. Now, I do want to talk about Aidan Hutchinson because Aidan Hutchinson had a really good year in his own right. Aidan Hutchinson overall really, really good. I don't have like grades necessarily for them because I think that's very subjective. And I think ranking is just easier than saying like, oh, we got an 8.9 out of 10, because I think I think that is objectifiable, right? Because my 8.9 out of 10 might be different than your 8.9 out of 10. So I don't really do like a grading like 1 through 10 or grading scale because that's subjective. I rank them in the order I think that they are. And I think Aidan Hutchinson is number 2, but it's a close number 2. And I don't do 1A and 1B because there is one player that is better than the other. And it's up for debate, but that's my opinion. Marcus Williams is going to get top 5 safety money, probably closer to 16 million. Holmes could probably backload the deal, but don't hold your breath. Marcus Williams is going to have many suitors. He will. And the Lions, I think if they sign Marcus Williams, will backload the contract. I don't know about 16 million. I'm thinking probably between 10 and 15. But if the Lions want to make it happen, they can make it happen. Cap space really isn't that big of a deal necessarily. Right? The Saints are like 60 million over the cap, and who knows? They might even re-sign Marcus Williams. It's a weird deal. But looking at Aidan Hutchinson is like 6'6", 230 pounds. I want to say off the top of my head. The games I watched, MSU, OSU, and Georgia, total 156 tackles in his career. Did play one more year than Kayvon Thibodeaux, just to keep in mind. Played 6 extra games, but had 1 extra season because he was injured in 2020. Total 156 tackles, 27.5 tackles for loss, 17.5 sacks, 10 passes defended, 5 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. And in 6 more games, he did not match the statistics of Kayvon Thibodeaux. And statistics are not the only thing that we're talking about, but I do think it's important to realize that Kayvon Thibodeaux played 6 less games, and he put up better numbers, not only per game, but overall in their careers. So Michael Johnson says, there's no way William Williams. I think there's a pretty good chance. And Karlaftis over both of those edge rushers, no. Yeah, I highly doubt we land Marcus Williams. I mean, the fit makes sense. It makes sense for the Lions, and it makes sense for Marcus Williams. And I think we just have to wait and see what happens. I don't think it's just a storyline, and I think the storyline helps, right, being with those coaches and everything. But I think it makes sense for both sides, right? Marcus Williams gets to go play for those coaches again that made him a top 5 safety, top 10 safety, and the Lions get a top 10 safety for, good money for sure, but it's not unreasonable for the Lions to go out and get Marcus Williams. And if they're going to get a big free agent this year, it's going to be Marcus Williams. So going to the pros of Aidan Hutchinson, he sets the edge very, very well. I've already talked about Hutchinson, so I'm going to go a little bit faster because there is a whole video breaking down Aidan Hutchinson, but he sets the edge very well. He is versatile, less versatile than Kayvon Thibodeaux. He's more of an edge, outside linebacker, or interior defensive lineman. He's not going to play as a linebacker necessarily, not going to play as an inside linebacker, a stand-up guy. He's going to have his hand in the dirt, and he is going to rush the passer. He has an incredibly high motor, and he never stops on a play. He's a super vocal leader, which I think sets him above. I think he sets above Kayvon in that regard. Right? I think he's just a more vocal leader on the field, and I think he's a more vocal person off the field, which maybe, his off the field stuff and like his interviews and stuff could sway that a little bit. But I feel like he's a little bit more vocal of a leader and kind of gets the defense aligned. But Michigan's defense also had more problems aligning themselves than the Oregon defense did. He has every pass rushing move and is more consistent about it. And he's an incredibly smart player. Where he's not great is he's not a good change of direction. He cannot cover. He's just kind of average around the edge, and he does anticipate the snap on occasion. Jeremiah Johnson climbing up draft boards too. Could be 5 edge guys taking. No, absolutely. this edge class is absolutely ridiculous. You have Kayvon Thibodeaux, Aidan Hutchinson, George Karlaftis, Jermaine Johnson, and I feel like I'm forgetting one. But there's probably 5 legit edge rushers that are going to go first round, and there's probably 3 of them that are going to go top 10. I think George Karlaftis, I don't think is as good. I don't think he has as high a floor as Aidan Hutchinson. He has nowhere near as high a ceiling as Kayvon Thibodeaux. But, he's a good player. So I think – and then Jeremiah Johnson is climbing draft boards. He's the next edge rusher that I really want to watch. I don't see us signing anybody big this year. Like I said, unless it is Marcus Williams, I don't see a big splashy free agent. I think the only way you see a big splashy free agent is if it's Marcus Williams and Marcus Williams wants to come here. I think that's the only way. One Pride 40 says Kayvon is lazy. No, he's not. I'd like to see a game or clips of Kayvon taking plays off, because on the games that I watched, he's not. On the games that I watched, Kayvon does not take off plays. I just didn't see it. I mean, there were so many plays where he didn't have to put in effort. He didn't have to sprint down this running back. He didn't have to get up off the ground to make a tackle. He didn't have to shed 2 blocks to get to the quarterback. He didn't have to, make all these plays. He could have taken these plays off because, they were losing. They weren't having the best game. He wasn't on. He played really, really well. And I did watch the UCLA game. I watched every single snap of that UCLA game. And I saw no plays where Kayvon took plays off. And I actually saw more plays where Kayvon put in phenomenal effort than where he put in no effort on those plays. I think maybe Holmes could get DJ Chark. I think a prove-it deal for Will Fuller could make sense as well. I don't like Will Fuller. I think he's had too many opportunities. I think he's had too much time to prove what he can do to not have proven it by now. And that's just my opinion. I think we can get Fuller for $6 to $7 million if you promise him the wider. Again, I just don't like Will Fuller. I mean, I get the game-breaking speed thing, but he's injury-prone, and I don't think Will Fuller's the right guy for the Lions. I think that if you're going to spend, $6 to $7 million on a wide receiver, I just don't think Will Fuller's your guy. I think he's way too injury-prone. I think that he, I think he's been in the NFL too long for us to still be like, okay, well, he could be this guy, but we know what he is. He's an injury-prone wide receiver that makes good plays on occasion. Hamilton over both. I agree with that. I think Hamilton over both the ends is the right move. He says depends on what Fuller wants to do. I just don't like the Will Fuller thing. I really, really don't like Will Fuller to be a Lion because I think it's just going to be a waste of money. I think he's going to be injured. I think he's going to stay injured. And I think he is just going to, I just don't think it's going to work out. I think you need a more consistent, healthy wide receiver, somebody that, like DJ Chark. DJ Chark is coming off of an injury, but DJ Chark also has been healthy prior to that injury, right? And it's not a nagging injury type thing with DJ. Excuse me. It's a one-time freak accident, can happen to anybody. Whereas, right, Will Fuller continues to tweak his hamstrings. When Will Fuller continues to have, calf problems, he continues to have like minor nagging injuries that just pile up over and over and over again. Aidan Hutchinson's hips are stiff. He is not very good around the edge. He has incredibly average bend for a defensive lineman. Not that makes him a bad player. It just kind of limits his ceiling as a true edge rusher, which is frustrating, but it's something you can work with. It's not he's an undraftable player. It's just more of not an ideal situation. Fuller has played 11 plus games in all seasons but one. His injury concerns have been baked into his price. Will Fuller's played 11 games. A season. There are 17 games a season. That means he misses on average 6 games a year. PFR. I just want to see the games that Will Fuller played. And just to illustrate my point. Will Fuller, 2016 to 2021. So he played 14 games as a rookie, missed 2. He played 10 games as a second-year player, missed 6. Played just 7 games in 2018, which, he missed half the season. He played 11 and 11 in 2 years, back-to-back years, 11 and 11. Again, still missing 5 games, and he played 2 games this year. He has played 11-plus games 3 of his 5 seasons. 3 of his 5 seasons, he has played more than 11 games, and he's only played this season 10. You're still missing 6. You missed 15 games this year. There is no season where he plays all 16 games, and I'm not paying a wide receiver all that money to play for me 80% of the time. That's just not what I think would work. Would you rather have Hamilton? I would. I think Hamilton is the best player in this class. I think he's the best player for the Detroit Lions. He better in a 4-3. Are we talking about Hutchinson? I assume. Yeah, Hutchinson's better in a 4-3. The Lions play a 3-4, which I think is why Kayvon would fit better with the Lions because he does play a 3-4 at Oregon. He is more of a 3-4 outside linebacker. He is more versatile. He is more athletic when it comes to changing direction and when it comes to, I'd say all around, Kayvon's more athletic. But when it comes to power, I think Aidan Hutchinson has him there. So, I mean, there's that. I don't see, Hutchinson. I mean, Holmes gave Tyrell Williams $6 million. He did. And then he realized his mistake and pretty much immediately cut Tyrell Williams because it just wasn't going to work. And I don't think he wants to make that mistake again. Brad Holmes, I would hope, can learn from those mistakes. I think he can move on. And I think that because of the Tyrell Williams thing biting him in the butt, I don't think he's going to sign somebody that's never played in a full season. Whereas if you look at, I'd be fine giving Fuller $6 million. I just don't want Fuller on the team. I honestly don't. Whereas if you look at DJ Chark, oh, maybe not. There it is. If you look at DJ Chark, I mean, okay, so as a rookie, he was kind of a depth player. That's fine. You know, he played 15 of the 16 games here, 13 here, and had a big injury. You know, you're missing one, you're missing a couple of games, right? It's not that big of a deal. And I feel like his injury concerns aren't as bad as Will Fuller. And Will Fuller, I think he's almost guaranteed an injury. Whereas DJ Chark, I feel like is a little bit more solid and you can trust his health a little bit more. I think we should draft Hamilton. I agree. Holmes isn't stubborn like Quinn was. No, Brad Holmes, I think, will learn. I think he will grow and be better. If Fuller wants more than that, pass. Obviously, I don't even think he's worth $6 million. Honestly, I mean, if he wants to come here for like a really, really, really cheap prove it deal, like I'm talking a couple million, and it's all incentives based, or if it's like $5 to $6 million, but it's all incentives based, then maybe. But I don't think spending that $6 million on Will Fuller would be worth it when you could spend those $6 million on Christian Kirk. You could spend those $6 million on a DJ Chark. You can spend those $6 million on half of Marcus Williams. Yeah, half of Marcus Williams or so. My biggest fear is him selling his soul to Goff. I don't think that he is. Brad Holmes is. Brad Holmes has a lot of confidence in Jared Goff as a player. But what I really think is telling is that Brad Holmes already is kind of saying, you know, Goff is our guy. Goff hasn't done anything to lose the starting job yet. Goff hasn't really, you know, lost the job per se, but he's also already kind of hinted at the fact that, like, you know, Jared Goff isn't safe. Jared Goff is not safe as the starting quarterback. Jared Goff is somebody that, you know, when it's all said and done, it very well can keep the starting job, and that's all up to him. But if not, there's always competition. Brad Holmes has already kind of alluded to that this season, that like if we draft a quarterback and that quarterback outplays Jared Goff will no longer be our starting quarterback. And I think that is telling, because like it'd be easy for Brad Holmes to say Goff's our guy, end of story, because you know that tells you less about some of their future plans for quarterback, and it doesn't stir up that drama. But Brad Holmes is out here saying, okay, there's a quarterback competition. If Jared Goff isn't playing well, he's not going to be our guy. And I think that is very, very telling. Why not just draft Tolbert? I don't know who that is necessarily, but if you would like to clarify. Okay, I prefer Chark as well. I'm just saying I could see Holmes being interested in Fuller. Yeah, maybe. I think for the right value, it's very, very possible. Kirk makes less sense than Fuller. Kirk is just Amon-Ra. No, he's not. He's a different wide receiver. He does very, very well. He led the Cardinals in receiving in pretty much every receiving category this season, despite being the number 2 and 3 option on a lot of plays, despite having to share targets with Rondale Moore, DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Green, and Chase Edmonds. He still led the team in receiving yards, receptions, and I believe receiving touchdowns. Christian Kirk is a really good wide receiver. He's very young and very, very good, and he is not Amon-Ra St. Brown. And even if he is Amon-Ra St. Brown, 2 Amon-Ra St. Browns is not a bad thing. Not at all. I like Tolbert, but no guarantee we get him either. I don't know who Tolbert is. Tolbert? Who is Tolbert? Am I just blanking? NFL draft Tolbert. Oh, Jalen. Okay, Jalen Tolbert. I see. I see. I haven't watched enough of Jalen Tolbert to have an actual opinion. I have not. I like the QB class of 23. I mean, it's Bryce Young, it's CJ Stroud. I don't know the quarterbacks for next year. Actually, I can look. I mean, and obviously the class might change, right? Somebody might declare early, somebody might come back in next season. It all depends, and I can go check that right now. So when you're looking at quarterback, right? Okay, so the two big guys go early, but you have Bryce Young, you have CJ Stroud next year. Those are really your big guys, obviously. And then you have Spencer Rattler, who I think has a lot of potential. You have Phil Dracovic, which I don't know much about. You have Hendon Hooker, who I actually have heard a lot of good things about, but I'm not sure. And it's just like this class. Like, I've heard good things about Grayson McCall. I actually like Jalen Daniels a lot. I like JT Daniels quite a bit as well, as like late guys. But like, I mean, I don't think the Lions are going to be bad enough next year to get a top 2 pick. So I think Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are both out, although obviously the Jaguars are not going to take Bryce Young and the Jets are not going to take CJ Stroud. That is ridiculous. But it's going off last year, I believe. It's going off last year's draft order. But I don't know. And maybe it's just because I don't know enough about next year's class yet. But I don't know. Jalen Cooler crushed the Senior Bowl. Yeah, again, I'll have to go watch him to find out. Draft a Sam Howell or Malik Willis this year. Can't wait to get Bryce Young or CJ Stroud next year. You can wait because quarterback is not the biggest option for the Lions right now. It's not like their biggest need or anything. Jackson Smith and Jigba, by the way. Oh, also Micah Meyer. I didn't even see that. But it's not that quarterback is the biggest need this year. It's that if the right guy is there, you can have that person. Don't be surprised if a trade up happens. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think if we drafted Hamilton, then Mumma in the first round? Mumma, NFL draft, Mumma. Chad Mumma, I don't see him as a first round player. Personally, I have him like middle of day 2. And that's just my personal opinion on him. Like, I think he's a good, like, mid-second to third-round pick. Personally, I think you can get better value with that second pick. Yeah, because Kirk played in the slot, which is what Amon-Ra plays. Amon-Ra plays a lot of different positions. And Christian Kirk is still a good wide receiver, and he can play on the boundary. He's been a boundary wide receiver before for the Cardinals. He doesn't just play in the slot. He is a guy that plays all over, and he can play really well for the Lions. McCall is there. Yes, Grayson McCall is there. And these rankings are going to change a lot. I'm not basing it off the rankings right now. I don't know enough about Grayson McCall yet, and we've been talking about him for, I feel like, 2 years at this point. And I should be watching him. I just haven't yet. Don't be surprised if we trade up. Okay, what about Hamilton and Brandon? Brandon Smith, I do like a little bit better. I do like a little bit better than Mumma. I think that would be a decent, but again, I think you can still get it. I don't think linebacker is necessarily your biggest need as your second round pick, and we can go through it, I mean, pretty much right now. And for what you'd have to pay Kirk, you might as well just go after a true outside wide receiver. Christian Kirk's only going to take like $2-3 million. Like, he's not going to be very expensive at all, or at least that's what he's projected is like $2 to $3 million at the most. Because, I mean, he's never had a 1,000-yard season, never been a number 1 guy. He's going to be cheaper than all the big names. So we'll just draft Kyle Hamilton number 1 because I think that's the best option. Mike Williams. I mean, Mike Williams, again, like, Mike Williams is going to be a lot more expensive. For sure, he's going to be a lot more expensive than that. But we do need it. I don't think it's the fact that you don't address linebacker. I think it's that linebacker isn't necessarily your biggest need when it comes to this year's draft. And I think you do address the linebacker position, but I think that's something you can either do in free agency right here with this situation, I would probably take DeMarvin Leal or Sam Howell, just my opinion. But I feel like at the end of the first round, your linebackers are going to be Christian Harris, who I'm conflicted on, and then Quay Walker, Chad Moma, they're projected to go late second, early third. So is Brandon Smith. And I just feel like you can get better value with a DeMarvin Leal, with a Sam Howell, with a Logan Hall, right? Christian Harris, maybe, but I just feel like there's better value there, especially to get a fifth-year option on, especially when you pick at 34, just a couple picks later. And yes, linebacker does need to be improved. Kirk is going to get as much or more than Tyler Boyd. I don't agree with that because I think Tyler Boyd has showed more than Christian Kirk has. Check linebacker. I think I just did, but Christian Harris is up here, who's fine. Quay Walker, probably, you could definitely get with 34. Chad Moma, you can definitely get. All of these linebackers from Brandon Smith up, you can get at 34. When you go to cornerback, Roger McCreary's good. But, do you want to take a corner in the first round when you're that deep already at cornerback? Probably not. Brad Holmesy move, it makes sense to go to Marvin Leal. If they really like Sam Howell at the Senior Bowl, they can go there. I personally don't think that linebacker is your pick at 32 because you can pick linebacker at 34. I think you get somebody that's more of a cornerstone piece while having the opportunity for that fifth-year option. Edge is the next place I'm going to go. For a little more than what you'd pay for Kirk, you could probably get Mike Williams. I just don't see the need for another slot-dependent wide receiver when we have Amon-Ra. But the thing is, Christian Kirk is not dependent on the slot. He's good in the slot, but he's not dependent. He's played boundary wide receiver before. That's the whole point. Edge rusher, it's Drake Jackson. Drake Jackson, I think, could be a big pickup for edge rusher. I like him a lot. Athletic guy. Didn't do great as far as numbers, but as far as I think impact on the game that you don't see on the stat sheet, I think Drake Jackson's really, really good. He's a player that I definitely consider here. I'd say he's on par with Jeremiah Johnson, maybe a little bit less. I'd say he's on par with, that second tier of edge rusher. I think your first tier is your Hutchinson and your Hamilton. And then I think you get to your Jermaine Johnson and your Drake Jackson. Also Arnold Ebiketie is also kind of a monster. So there's also that. I agree with that. But again, Arnold you can get with the 34th pick. Arnold you can get with, probably not your 66. That's probably a stretch, but definitely at 32. And the way I think the Lions go about this at 32, because this I think is more interesting almost in the 32nd pick, because edge rushers in this class, this edge rushing class is deep, right? Because I think Drake Jackson's a really good one. Arnold I think is a really good player. But down with your your early third round pick, excuse the voice crack, Maja Sanders is really good. Boye Mafa is really, really good if you want a mid-round edge rusher. So I think that's very possible. And I think the Lions, they're going to go one of two ways. And those two ways are going to be either quarterback, which if they really, really like Sam Howell, I think they can go quarterback. Would rather draft a wide receiver. I don't see a wide receiver going in the first round. These are the wide receivers. I really like George Pickens. I want George Pickens to be a Lion so badly. And Mafe is a monster. And that's kind of somebody I was targeting a little bit later. And I genuinely believe the Lions would take Sam Howell in this position. I think they worked with Sam Howell. I think they like Sam Howell a lot. And this is not an actual what I think is necessarily going to happen. I just want to play this out and see how it goes. So DeMarvin Leal goes there. You have Kyle Hamilton. You have DeMarvin Leal. Your next pick is at 66, and you're yet to address edge rusher and wide receiver yet, which I think are the two big ones. So for me right now, it's between George Pickens and Drake Jackson. I think both are really deep as far as edge rushers and wide receivers. And that's fine if you disagree. I mean, again, this is just a hypothetical scenario. If this is how the board played out, I can't see the Lions taking Drake Jackson if they really believe in a quarterback. I don't see the Lions taking a linebacker. I mean, a linebacker that's honestly not even deservedly first-round pick at that position. I think you get a fifth-round pick on your quarterback, trade back in the second to get both. That's also an option. That's also something very true. I didn't do trades yet. We'll probably get the trades very, very soon. But I mean, it's not like a end all be all. It's just a hypothetical situation. And I mean, I think edge rusher is more important. And I think that Drake Jackson is really good, but I think Arnold Ebiketie is really underrated. I do. And I think that Arnold Ebiketie, if that's how you say it, I don't know how to say his name. He's a really good wide receiver. I mean, he is just checks all the boxes, is a little bit raw, but also has a lot of potential as well. George Pickens and David Bell go off the board here. I don't think you can pass on them. Kirk had the 13th highest slot snap percentage out of all wide receivers in the league. He's 100% a slot. He can still produce. He can still produce outside, and I've seen him produce outside. But you know what? If you don't like the Christian Kirk thing, that's totally fine. DJ Chark is up there as well. DJ Chark is my number 1, and Christian Kirk is my number 2. I think Kirk can play on the outside, but that's fine. Here, I would probably start looking linebacker. Chad Muma is on the board at 66. Brandon Smith is here. I personally like Brandon Smith a little bit better. We've already addressed edge rusher. I personally like Brandon Smith a little better as far as wide receiver. Like Jalen Tolbert is still on the board. So is John Mechie. So is Justin Ross. If I could trade back a couple of spots and try to get, Justin Ross and Brandon Smith, I would. I don't know. I mean, we can try. Where would we want to trade down to? Does anybody even have like multiple picks in here? I don't see anybody with like a bunch of picks close together. So I think in this position, the Lions should go linebacker. I really like Brandon Smith. I think Brandon Smith would be your guy here. I mean, just a good linebacker, kind of doubling up with Penn State. I mean, which is not intentional necessarily, but it's something that just kind of fell that way. Chad Muma goes at 78. Thayer Munford. Kobe Bryant goes to the Steelers. As we just wait and go down the board. Did Justin Ross go yet? Oh, he must have. Okay. And now you're here. And honestly, I've heard a lot of good things about Christian Watson. I've yet to watch him myself, but I've heard a lot of good things about Christian Watson. And you're not going to take a quarterback. You're not going to take a tight end. You're not going to take a running back in the top 100. Tight end, running back, tight end, running back, tight end. Offensive tackle, you could think about, again, tight end, quarterback, running backs. Corner, you could potentially take a look at. You've already addressed linebacker. I think that Christian Watson is the guy here. Christian Watson, I really liked him on paper, I really like him. So I think that's the guy for this. It's really the best value for the Lions at the number 97 pick. Smith is still there. Which Smith are you talking about? I don't know. So the Lions do that. I mean, so far you've addressed your edge, your wide receiver, your quarterback, your safety, and your linebacker. The defensive line is definitely still something that I would hope the Lions would address in this game. But Watson, I think, is the best pick there. Again, like Nolan said, he is a guy that is 6'5", 4.4 speed, was really the heart and soul of that passing offense at North Dakota State last year. Take Smith, he's staring you in the face. What Smith? Are you talking about Brandon Smith? I don't know what Smith you're talking about. Pickens is another one that I really, really want. I'm just not sure how feasible it's going to be. Oh, okay, I guess I did it right. I love Burks and London. Those are only 2 wide receivers I would be interested in the first round if I were Holmes. honestly, if I were Holmes, I'm not even thinking wide receiver in the first round because this class is pretty deep. All the Lions pick back-to-back here, of course. Best on the board is all running backs. You have Devontae Price, Hassan Haskins. It's running backs down the board, essentially at this point. If you wanted to double up back at wide receiver, there's not much for you, honestly. Oh, never mind. I like both of these guys quite a bit. I actually like all three of them, but I don't think you'd go there. The D line class is pretty heavily depleted at this point. The cornerback class is not great, although I do really like Zion McCollum. Right here, I feel like your best bet is running back, honestly. Ouch. I just cut myself by accident. And we'll go through a couple of these just to kind of play out different scenarios. I don't really like Damon Price. We don't really need that short yardage back. If anything, we need a guy that you can be a bell cow and get good yards. We need that 1,000-yard rusher, not necessarily that 15 touchdown rusher. I mean, it's just at this point in the draft, it's almost as if running back is staring you in the face, right? Because you're not going to go safety twice probably. Defensive line is really, really depleted. Edge is depleted. Linebacker is okay. But like running back, I feel like you can warrant because it's 176. All the best players on the board are running backs. And I know Hassan Haskins is really good, but I'm a big fan of Jerome Ford personally. I just think, running back is the option here, right? Because you can double up at wide receiver. Offensive lineman, I really like Nick Ford, but he's not. I mean, you have another pick right there. Okay, Brandon Smith. That's what I thought. I was just making sure. I think you could very similar talent level around later if you like guys like Olave and Jameson. Both of those guys are probably going in the first round, honestly. Olave is probably definitely going in the first round. But here I like Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford is somebody that, is just really good at tennis or at Cincinnati. And Nick Ford is somebody that I really don't want to miss on. He is one of my best interior offensive linemen, or one of my favorite for a later rounds. I'd taken OT earlier. Decker was out. We were 0-9. We run a 3 offensive tackle set. Yeah, and I think offensive tackle is something that we will get to. If the right guy falls, I almost want to pause it right here. I'm not going to trade with that. Myron Cunningham is somebody that I really like. Him and Austin DeSulis, I think is how you say it. Those are my 2 targets for late round offensive tackles because they're both really good run blockers. And I think in a 3 offensive tackle set, that could be really, really beneficial. So we're going to see. Don't go. Okay, so I like Austin. He's a 4-year starter at LSU. That is your tackle depth. That is your 3rd tackle. If I could even pick the guy. Can I? Okay, there you go. Draft him. And this is just an opinion. I want to go through this again because I didn't intend this to go like a full defensive mock draft or full mock draft in general. This is just kind of how it turned out. I started it and I really wanted to finish it. On the board left, I mean, there's not a ton. I think this is the last pick the Lions hold is we actually hold 2 more. An offensive tackle early would be a luxury. Yeah, again. But I think there's also some good defensive linemen late, or not offensive linemen late, like your Nick Ford, like your Cunningham out of Arkansas. That could be really, really good. I mean, there's not a ton here. There's nothing really sticking out. If you go to just all the best players available, I mean, you can upgrade at tight end, I guess, if you really wanted to. You could get an edge from Georgia. CJ Verdell is a fine player. There's just nothing really here. Charleston Rambo, I think, has some high potential. They've been talking about taking 2 wide receivers in this year's class. You take your one early. Jalen Naylor is somebody that I really like. I mean, none of these guys are sticking out. I know Charleston Rambo's he's got a high ceiling. I know he's pretty good. So I think we'll do that here. I mean, at this point, we're moving on pretty soon here. You're back on the clock. I mean, you're not going to take a wide receiver. Maybe a tight end if there's a good tight end available, which, I mean, I'll take actually, you know what? I'll take Connor Hayward. I'll take Connor Hayward, the tight end, kind of a do-it-all player, can do running back, tight end, all that. Guy that Dan Campbell really likes. Just, you know, somebody that I think can be beneficial in a lot of different positions for the Lions. So that was not an intentional mock draft, but I think this one turned out pretty good. I like how this one turned out. You got Kyle Hamilton, Sam Howell. You got your edge rusher 1. You got your linebacker at 66. I like Christian Watson at wide receiver. Why this running back? I'd say a luxury pick, but one the Lions can afford at 176 when all the value is there. These are two really good offensive linemen, in my opinion, especially the tackle, who is just a really good run blocker for the Tigers and was actually a member of the Tigers national championship team and started on that team. Rambo, again, kind of a flyer wide receiver that could be something. And then Connor Hayward, just because he worked with them so closely at the Senior Bowl. We only have 4 picks in the top 100. We really shouldn't be spending one of them on a backup O-line when you have so many starting positions that can be filled. Yeah, no, I 100,000% agree with you on that. I don't think tackle needs to go high, but I also think you can get some quality depth linemen. I mean, as late as the 6th and the 7th round.
Buy more, save more.
No, let's not. Let's not do that. Okay. I don't even know if you guys can hear that, but let's not. Low key, all our offense really needs is a quarterback. I'd say they need a wide receiver too. I'd say they need a wide receiver. A transcendent quarterback would be ideal, right? But I think you go defensive heavy in this draft. I think you focus on wide receiver, and I think backup tight end is another position that could be a big one. But other than that, I wouldn't go super heavy on the offensive side of the ball. If anything, the only offensive positions I want to see addressed for starters is quarterback if it's good value, wide receiver, of course, and backup tight end, but really late, like maybe your Brock Wright of this year. I mean, I know it's the same as before. I really think Kyle Hamilton's the best player. I really do, and if that's how the board's going to fall, I'm not going to take a quarterback this time, or I'm going to try really hard not to. This one kind of plays out very similarly every single time. We need BPA regardless of position while in a rebuild. Not necessarily. I mean, you're not going to take an offensive tackle with your 2nd overall pick because you have 2 really good offensive tackles. But, that's just a personal opinion. So with this one, the way the board is falling, Sam Howell is on the board, but in this scenario, we're going to say the Lions aren't in love with Sam Howell. They think he's a good quarterback, but not our guy. This offense wasn't really all that bad. They ran the ball a lot, and Goff was able to turn in the late season with a superb wide receiver we had. Yeah. You're not wrong about quarterbacks. I mean, I think quarterback is that pick where it's like, if it falls, you can get it. But if it doesn't, don't force it. And with the Lions going safety in round 1, I really like Logan Hall, the defensive lineman. I think Logan Hall could be a good pickup. But I kind of want to trade this pick away. And I want to see if there's anybody that holds multiple picks in the 2nd round. No OT. No, exactly. Well, I'm just saying, like, in a hypothetical scenario is what I was more referring to. There's not really any. I mean, the Jets hold 2. But I don't know if the Jets would be willing to give up. Oh, the Jets are right here. Like, I don't know if they'd be willing to give up that and that for the 32nd pick. It'd be close. You can give them a 3rd next year, or a 2nd next year. That's too much. I say a third next year and like 179, 176. This is kind of how these trades seem to go most of the time. It's a lot of playing around. No, it's not stupidity. I don't even know what that's referring to, honestly. Maybe the Lions can get this and that for 1 and 2. It's just going to be a lot of playing around with it. I have it set on strict trades. So I don't know. I'm going to just assume that nothing's working out for the Detroit Lions. And I think in a Brad Holmes way, I think Logan Hall is a good option here. Yeah, tackle's the last position on this team that needs to be addressed. Yeah, I would agree. Tackle's probably the last one. I see people suggesting DT at 2. That's weird. But when you're thinking like edge, I feel like is really important. I would take Drake Jackson. I'm really struggling between Arnold and Drake Jackson. I think Drake Jackson has more versatility, which I think Aaron Glenn's really going to like. But also Arnold, I think, has a higher ceiling maybe because of his athleticism. So I'm going to take Arnold here at 32. And then here, I mean, there's still a defensive lineman, but I really like George Pickens. George Pickens, I think, is huge. Right, Joey, when Decker returned. I really like George Pickens, and I want George Pickens to be a Lion so badly. And I think at 34, it makes sense. The Lions' biggest need is wide receiver. George Pickens is a dominant wide receiver on the boundary. I really think it makes sense here. And, I mean, when you look at the rest of the board, I don't want to draft Sam Howell. Tackle's not a big need. Safety, we've already addressed. Defensive lineman, sure. You're not going to take a tight end this high. You're not going to take a lineman. Probably, I don't like Christian Harris personally. Safety you're not going to address. Edge you're not going to address. Running backs, tackles, defensive linemen. Fedarian Mathis is a possibility. And it really comes down to who do you like between these two. And personally, I like George Pickens the best. That's your wide receiver one of the future. That's your next Megatron. That is your next alpha number 1 wide receiver. And I think that's what the Detroit Lions need right now. So they go down and down and down. David Bell becomes a Viking. That is unfortunate. True. When Decker came back, when Josh Reynolds came on board, when Campbell took over play calling, a lot of things went into Goff having a better second half. That is true. That is very, very true. So the Lions now have addressed safety, edge, and wide receiver 1. And are back on the clock. Now this was the Lions in a different situation because they've already addressed wide receiver. They've already addressed defensive. They've already addressed edge rusher. And the best players are quarterbacks or running backs, tight end, offensive tackle. Jalen Tolbert is here at linebacker. You have a lot of good players. And I think Brandon Smith would be the pick here, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. We have arguably a top 10 O-line. Why in the world would we take yet another tackle? Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. And I think we would draft a tackle. I think we will draft a tackle, but I think it'll be somewhere in the late hundreds, if not early 200s. So that is just my personal opinion. And as fun as the idea is that the Lions will draft Kenneth Walker III, and him and DeAndre Swift will just run and go crazy. This is a video I tried to work on. It got blocked. Nelson held his own for the first time ever playing tackle. I'm willing to bet Nelson is even better this season. He might just be a serviceable switch tackle. Possible. We have depth at center, offensive guard, not at tackle. And I'm not saying we don't draft at tackle. I'm just saying we don't draft highly at tackle because that would be a poor use of our resources. So, I mean, just going off best player available, you can make the argument that it's Chad Muma. You can make the argument that it's Brad Smith or Brandon Smith. I really like Brandon Smith personally, and I think that is probably going to be the option. Rashad Walker is a tackle that is really good. I mean, before the last season, Nelson was a defensive end. No, I understand that. I'm just saying, as far as the whole offensive tackle argument, I think you are going to draft one. I don't know what to do here, guys, because my first thought would be linebacker. You could double up at wide receiver. So far, we have our safety, edge, and wide receiver one. We could double up at wide receiver and get Justin Ross, which would be, I mean, a great thought. Travis Jones is on the board, who I honestly don't know much about. I mean, I don't want a quarterback because I don't think Desmond Ridder is the guy. And Carson Strong, I have a bad feeling. No, I'm not going to draft Kenneth Walker. I wish. That'd be so fun to think about, but no. I don't know because I don't want a running back necessarily. If I'm doubling up at wide receiver, I want Justin Smith, or not Justin Smith. Who the heck is Justin Smith? I want Justin Ross if we're doubling up at wide receiver. But I also don't think Brandon Smith is going to be there at 97. You know what? We're gonna double up. We're gonna go Justin Ross. Those are your two boundary wide receivers for the future. It's those two, and it's Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot, and you're having a really young, talented wide receiver core, giving Jared Goff all the weapons that he can possibly have, and hopefully giving your future quarterback the best options at the wide receiver position. Again, these are just hypotheticals. And I did this because I think the linebacking depth is really good. Brandon Smith almost actually made it to 97, which would have been ridiculous. But I do think you address edge, or not edge. I do think you address linebacker. Personally, I want to have a killer defense at all costs. I do too. And I think that I like Damone Clark. Damone Clark is somebody that is just a really solid, underrated linebacker. Maybe doesn't have the flash of Devin White or doesn't have the flash of Patrick Queen, but somebody that is just all around a really good linebacker and worked with the Lions at the Senior Bowl, so they know what they're getting with that linebacker. Fair enough. I'm sure Holmes will do something to solidify tackle depth since I'm sure I don't think Crosby's coming back. Maybe a cheap free agent, maybe a day 3 guy. I'm sure Holmes will add a little bit of depth. I'm sure he will. I don't think – I know for a fact that Brad Holmes is not just going to ignore the tackle position because, that just wouldn't make any sense. Our depth at tackle isn't really all that good as Kyron Williams just continues to fall down this draft board over and over. And there he goes to the Houston Texans. I was going to say, if he falls all the way to, whatever the Lions' next pick is, if he's there – he is all mine. If I was Crosby, I would not back. Yeah. I would assume you mean I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't either. It's just a new regime, a new group. If I was Tyrell Crosby, I would also move on. As we move down and down and down the board some more. So right now we've addressed edge, linebackers, safety, and the wide receivers. From here on out, I want to go defense. I want to go corner. I want to go linebacker. I want to go whatever defensive players are available. Defensive line, that does not look very good, honestly. Linebacker, not anything crazy. I really like this kid. He's like 6'4" and has at least 2 interceptions every single year. And again, actually, funny enough, played at the Senior Bowl. Calvin Shepard, the Lions linebacker coach, was Damone Clark linebacker coach at the Senior Bowl. There's a good chance the Lions take him. Yeah, and that's kind of the reasoning I went with for why Damone Clark was that guy, is because I think he's a really good player. I honestly, I don't know much about some of these defensive tackles, so I'm going to go off of statistics here. Sports reference. I just want to see, obviously I'm not going to get all of my information from this, but I want to see Like Thomas Booker. I've never heard of Thomas Booker. Thomas Booker has 20 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, and 1 interception while being a 6'4", 310-pound defensive lineman, a 4-year starter. I mean, that's pretty good. I think he could be a good defensive lineman depth. He could be really, really good. I like him. I like that pick. And then at 179, this is somebody that I really, really like. Zion McCollum is, I mean, just a good football player. And he's not even on because he played for an FCS school, but Zion McCollum stats. This is crazy. And I didn't know about this guy until this year. He played 5 years at the collegiate level. He had 3 interceptions in 4 of those 5 years. He also forced 2 fumbles, took 2 of his interceptions back to the house, by the way. So he has 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 interceptions in 5 years, while being a 6'4", 195-pound cornerback that has forced 4 fumbles in his career. And I know that it is an FCS player and all that, but I really, really like Zion McCollum. Just he's big, long, doesn't really get beat all that often. I really like him a lot. So that is, again, another defensive-heavy pick. I want to go defense all the way out unless there's a really good linebacker looking or a really good running back looking me in the face. I'm not sure Crosby has many options. If Holmes offers Crosby a contract, I would 100% take the offer. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Crosby's situation is right now. I don't know how heavily teams are looking at him in as far as free agency right now. The Lions are back on the clock. It looks like right now we're going linebacker heavy or edge maybe. I don't know what this edge rusher put up. I do numbers just to get a feel for it. Really. Just to see if they're a pass rusher, to see if they're more of a run blocker. Watch Brett Coleman's interview with Booker. It shows how much a kid knows about football. Yeah, no, I think that's – I haven't seen it, but I'm sure I really respect the opinion of Brett Coleman. He's one of my favorite people to listen to, and honestly, he's taught me kind of a lot about football. How do I spell this? E-I or E-S-E is the only one. 7.5 sacks, 13.5 tackles for loss in 4 years. He's big. He's 6'6". I don't know if I want to double up though there. James Skalski. I know James Skalski is a big-time leader. And doubling up at linebacker wouldn't be the worst idea. 18.5 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, 9 passes defended. Some good numbers from Skalski. But I know he's a big leader. That's the big thing about Skalski is that I've realized is he is a really good leader and has been kind of that guy, that communicator on the Clemson defense. And then you have Ellis Brooks. I'm going to take James Skalski. He's a big hitter. He is a leader in the middle. You double up at linebacker after having probably at least one of your linebackers leave in free agency. I think doubling up there makes sense. I think Crosby takes an injury settlement. That's possible. It's definitely possible. All right, the Lions with their last pick in the class are going to stay defensive. Are there any good safeties? There's nobody really special. Any good corners? Not really. Edge. What does Adam Anderson look like? Adam Anderson, the edge from Georgia. If he's an edge from Georgia, I can't imagine he's bad. He just won a national championship after all. Yeah, 15.5 tackles for loss. I like that. I think rotational guy, another edge rusher. You're potentially, unless actually I didn't even look at offensive line, but I bet all my guys are gone. Oh, actually, we're going to take Austin. We're going to take the offensive tackle to fill it out. Oh, we have one more. Sick. Sweet. That actually works out perfectly. Oh, just kidding. It doesn't work out perfectly because my guy just went one pick before me. Thanks, Steelers. We should get Willis this year. They are only 2 quarterbacks next year, and we won't get them. Since I don't know who that is. Late if home feels like he must take a running back. Adam Anderson geez, I didn't know that. I did not know that. Okay, well, good thing we didn't take him. I appreciate the information because I would have been blissfully unaware. Well, yeah, it just didn't show up at the bottom there. Okay. Well, then we're not taking Adam Anderson then for sure. That's one thing that I can tell you for certain. I think Crosby already took an injury settlement last season. I also believe that to be the case. Running back, CJ Verdell is up there. Kennedy Brooks is up there. But I think you can get probably one of them in undrafted free agency. Linebacker, you're probably not going back to. Okay, let's just take a best player available. Derek Deese actually is a decent receiving tight end. Anderson would have been a first-round pick. Personally, I just don't want that distracting from the team. They were happy with Devontae Beckett's progress. He may step up. That is also true. Derek Deese Jr. is an option. We've already addressed tackle, linebacker twice. Running back is an option, but I don't love it as an option. Christopher Allen, the edge from Alabama, I've looked into. Not a huge fan. I know we said it's a defensive-heavy draft, and we did draft 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 defenders to just 1, 2, 3. I think you make it a 6-4 draft class. I think you go running back. Kennedy Brooks is really, really good. I mean, 1,000 yards every single year. It's, kind of that Jamar Jefferson pick, but it also makes a lot of sense. I'd take Dontario Drummond. I think he's more like a 4th to 5th. Fair. And then that's kind of the class. Like, that's how it shaped out. That's how I think the Lions will go about this, because I'm not completely sold on the fact that they love Sam Howell. Where did Sam Howell actually end up going? I'm just curious. I know it wasn't in the first. I went to the Seahawks. Oh, no, he didn't. He went to the Washington football team. That makes sense. But when you look at the Lions, again, it's a defensively heavy draft class. I think Crosby was misdiagnosed, avoiding the injury settlement. I don't remember, honestly. But this is kind of how the draft class played out. Kyle Hamilton, the best player at 2. Edge rusher at 32, right? Your guy that has a lot of upside. Maybe isn't a Kayvon Thibodeaux, but is definitely a high-grade edge rusher. 34 is Pickens. Then you double up with Justin Ross. Those are 2 future top wide receivers in the NFL, in my opinion. Damone Clark is a good linebacker the Lions have worked with. Thomas Booker, I think, is kind of a sleeper in this class. Zion McCollum, again, another sleeper. James Skalski, linebacker. You go 4 defensive players in a row. Right, you get that leader, you get a depth corner, because we know how important that is. Got a depth defensive lineman, you know how important that is. Linebacker is really good. And then you, at the last 2 picks in the 7th round, your 7th-round picks, you go with a run-blocking offensive tackle that can slide in as your 3rd OT on run-blocking plays. And you get Kennedy Brooks, who has gone for over 1,000 yards, over 1,100 yards, 3 straight seasons in the Big 12 at Oklahoma. So I think it's a good draft class, honestly. And I would love to get an edge rusher. I mean, obviously, Kayvon Thibodeaux, I think, would be a great player for the Lions. And it's all going to change depending on this free agency class, right? If the Lions sign a safety or 2, I would expect Kayvon Thibodeaux. But right now, based on the current roster, I would expect the Detroit Lions to probably go with Kyle Hamilton with the number 2 overall pick. Danny Gray, SMU wide receiver. I mean, the draft's already over, but yeah, I mean, this is kind of how I see it playing out. I think it's a defensively heavy draft class, and I think you shore up a couple things in free agency, like, I don't know. I mean, you pretty much got all your needs right here: defensive line, linebacker, wide receiver, safety, edge, offensive tackle. So these draft simulators always go BPA, and the real draft always has players fall because of injuries or positional need. That is true. Steve-O. But at the same time, I feel like it's fairly realistic. I can see the Jaguars going tackle at 1. that's not necessarily best player available because it has, I think, Aidan Hutchinson is number one. And it's gone Aidan Hutchinson several times. Kayvon Thibodeaux makes sense. Iquanu makes sense. Cross is not the sixth best player in the class, in my opinion. Neither is Tyler Lindenbaum being the seventh. Kenny Pickett, I don't think, is a top 10 player in the class. Going down the board, I don't think Jameson Williams will go this high because of his ACL. I'm just trying to think. Like Trayvon Walker's not the best player available, more positional based. So is Roger McCreary and Kyer Elam, to be fair. I mean, I think it bases position off pretty well too. That's true. They all run off very, very different rankings. That's another thing to think of. The talent in this draft isn't as good as past couple of years, in my opinion. We won't know for sure to the day of Combine and Pro Days. We won't know about what? I think we know a lot about this draft class right now. We know that it's really good. I want to go through one more, but I want to draft Kayvon Thibodeaux number one. I want to run through that scenario as well because we've gone through two with Kyle Hamilton being the first safety. And I just want to go through one more. I just want to go through a mock draft of Kayvon Thibodeaux being the guy. Because as I mentioned in the very beginning of this stream, if you haven't seen it, you can go back and check it out, or you can wait for me to upload a video about it. I think Kayvon Thibodeaux is the best edge rusher in this class. I think Kayvon Thibodeaux is a phenomenal talent. He is talent-wise, like physically gifted-wise, much, much better than Aidan Hutchinson. Not much better. He's above Aidan Hutchinson. But, I want to try Kayvon Thibodeaux. I want to see how it changes the drafting strategy. I want to see how it changes what safeties get taken, what players get taken. I didn't see when Malik Willis came off the board. Chris Olave goes to the Bills. It makes a little too much sense. And, it's going to be kind of a similar thing. If Matt Corral falls to 17, I could see the Lions thinking about it as well. I agree, Steve-O, and I think that's why the Combine is going to be extra important this year. At least I feel like teams may learn more heavily on athletic testing this year. That's true. I can see that. But here, now we have our dominant edge rusher. The safety class, I think, is also really deep. I like Vernon McKinley a lot. I like Bubba Bolden. I like Daxton Hill and Jaquan Brisker. I just don't know about Lewis Sign. I know a lot of people do like him. I'm just not necessarily one of those people. So I don't think safety is the option here. We already got our edge. I think you go with your defensive line. I think Javonte Wyatt is a really good defensive lineman. Logan Hall actually goes 33, which actually works pretty well. I think you double up at defensive line. And then here, I want to say Daxton Hill, but I also really like a lot of the other safeties later. What about trading down with Philly or maybe New York Jets, acclimating more picks? It's definitely possible, but I didn't get into all that today. That's for another video entirely. So, you're here now. You're not going to take a quarterback. Matt Corral, maybe. But I don't know how to feel about Matt Corral. And Sam Howell, again, I really like Sam Howell, but I know there's a lot of people that don't. So we're just going to keep it, I guess, as realistic as possible, according to others. Daxton Hill is a possibility. It makes sense to keep the Michigan guy. I don't want to address safety here. We've already addressed defensive line. Linebacker here, it feels early. I don't know. Why would teams trade up to number 2, though? For what and for who? The only one I could really feel trading up to 2 is the Jets if a defensive lineman goes first overall. Because I think the Jets will target a edge rusher first. It just feels like a Robert Saleh kind of move. Feels like what Robert Saleh would like to do. That makes sense to me. But that's just my opinion. You know what? Let's go with Daxton Hill. Daxton Hill is a all Big Ten. He's an all Big Ten player. I believe first team all Big Ten. He is a 3-year starter, 4 interceptions, 15 passes defended, 3 fumble recoveries, 7.5 tackles for loss. I like Daxton Hill to come to the Detroit Lions here. You get him. I mean, again, top safety in the class. Maybe not the top safety, but he's a top safety in this class. He's a good player. He just I think would fit. He kind of fit that narrative. Like, we're keeping a Michigan kid at home. I really, really like the pick. I think both of our wide receivers went top 50, unfortunately. Kool-Aid and Cornbread, how's it going? Welcome in. How are you doing today? Our edge rusher from Penn State got taken. I can't remember seeing a team trade in the top 3 to take a non-quarterback. Personally, nothing is coming to mind. Now, here, if Sam Howell somehow falls to 66, the Lions are going to take him. And I'm sorry for people that don't want a quarterback, but Sam Howell is too good at the 66th overall pick not to select. He is a really good wide receiver, as Justin Ross goes to the Bears. He is a really good wide receiver, or really good quarterback. And if somehow, some way he falls to 66, there is no realistic way the Lions pass on him. Yeah, trade down just isn't adding up, unfortunately. I agree. I don't think trading down is likely because I don't think there's that quarterback that everybody can agree on is the number 1 guy, right? And as funny as this might sound, like I don't think they're going to trade up like they did for Mitch Trubisky. I just don't see a top 2 trade as of right now. The Lions are back on the board as of right now. Christian Watson is my target. Right now, it's did we address linebacker yet? I think so. We did not. But I think wide receiver is a bigger need. I think you can get another guy later. Brandon Smith is tough to pass on, but I think Christian Watson is your guy. He is, your big, fast, prototypical X wide receiver. And I think the Lions will take him. I really do. So the Lions, they start off defensively heavy, but they go back-to-back offensive picks here. And I want to focus on defense the rest of the way out. Maybe some depth linemen, maybe a running back at the last pick, but that's it. From now on, it is going to be defensive heavy until the 7th round of this draft. Or, again, if there's really good wide receiver depth somewhere, but I personally just don't see it playing out that way. So the Lions right now, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At least 3 of these are going to be defensive players. At least 3 of them. As we can get off wide receiver. Thomas Booker went. That really stinks. We did address defensive line though, so that doesn't hurt us as much. Linebacker, unfortunately, it looks as though did what's his name go really, really high? He must have. Okay, well, that throws dude, Damone Clark must have gone insanely high. Okay, I missed him. I don't know where he is. If somebody saw it, let me know. But Damone Clark is gone. Linebacker, I think, should still be addressed. And I think DeMarco Jackson is your guy. He reminds me a lot of Jalen Reeves-Maven. I think he can be a huge contributor on special teams while being that developmental guy. So I think linebacker is the pick there. And then when's our next pick after this? 217. I think he'll be there. I really do. So we're here. Luquette is an option. Hansford is an option. I really like Digene Nixon. Justin Ross is an option too. Villas Jones is an option. As I think about this, let me know what you guys want it down in the comments. Maybe at 32nd, but the Lions might want to stay with the first rounder. I think 32nd is a good option for a trade, but we'll see. They got 10 picks. I think that's enough to make the team better without trading. Yeah, I agree. If Holmes with the Rams got Goff number 1 overall and Dorsey history got Baker number 1, are there any indication, I'd say there's at least a small chance. There's a chance. There's always a chance. Troy Anderson is a solid linebacker prospect, but he's raw considering he's a quarterback a couple years ago. Yeah. So here, I mean, defensive line would be nice probably to upgrade. Edge, you've already got an edge. A linebacker, you'd probably double up. I'm going to go with Zion McCollum again. I mean, I talked about him before. I think he's just going to be a huge player on this defense. I really do. I think he's the kind of cornerback that you'd want to work with if you were Aaron Glenn. And I just think it makes a lot of sense if you are the Lions. So now we're going to go down and down and down and down and down. My top lineman prospects, well, he's gone. And okay, they're almost all gone. I'm gonna take Austin. Again, I know these are lower guys, but right now I just don't know enough about all of the lower end guys to really have a ton of variety. But I will switch up the last pick and I will go Connor Hayward. I know they just signed Jason Kabinda, but I think Connor Hayward can be just an all-around good player, a really all-around good prospect. Can play running back, can play fullback, can definitely play tight end, which helps our tight end need there. And we have one more. We have one more pick. Ellis Brooks is on the board. I think if Ellis Brooks falls, I think he's a good enough player to go here. I really do. I would be cool if Willis was the pick at 2. I think he is good. I think he's the be good if he goes to the right situation. I agree. I think for the right situation, you're going to get a good quarterback out of Malik Willis. And I think the Lions, what they're building, could give Malik Willis that opportunity, could give them that situation. We'll save here and we'll just recap. Again, Kayvon Thibodeaux at 2, Devontae Wyatt at 32, Daxton Hill at 34. You also address a defense, linebacker, cornerback, and linebacker again. It is a defensive-based draft, and I think that if the board falls like this, right, I think if Sam Howell's at 66, you have to take him. I think if Christian Watson's at 97, you have to take him. If, DeMarco Jackson's there, you have to take him at 176, especially if Damone Clark is gone. I think this is how the draft is going to play out, right? You're going to go defensive heavy first. If your quarterback is there at a good price, you take your quarterback. If your quarterback isn't there for the right price, then you move on and you go to the next one, right? I really think that this is how the draft is going to play out. So with that being said, I think that's all we're going to have you for today. Again, I really just wanted to talk about Kayvon Thibodeaux. I really wanted to talk about Aidan Hutchinson and compare the two. And I was just kind of in the mood to go through a couple of mock drafts. So that being said, that is all for you guys today. We've been on here for an hour and 37. If you guys have not done so yet, please hit the like and subscribe button if you are not yet subscribed so you can stay tuned to all of this Lions content. But all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.